Nothing hurts an NFL fan like a bad trade. Wrong move can derail a franchise for years. Just ask the Saints, who once traded away their entire draft for a running back. But before we get to New Orleans, for what was possibly the worst trade in NFL history, there are a few other deals in contention for that title. So let's kick things off in Houston with the Texans' baffling decision to trade one of their greatest players ever. Because when a receiver is coming off his third consecutive All-Pro season, you usually want to keep him. But former Texans head coach and general manager Bill O'Brien disagrees. In the 2020 offseason, DeAndre Hopkins was at the peak of his powers. He had put together the best 3 seasons of his career, was in the middle of a 5-year deal, and his connection with quarterback Deshaun Watson was strong. But for some reason, O'Brien felt a desperate need to run the ball. So, in a shocking move, O'Brien traded Hopkins and a 4th-round pick to the Arizona Cardinals for running back David Johnson, a 2nd-round pick and a 4th-round pick.
DeAndre Hopkins is part of that deal.
I can't believe that the Houston Texans would make this move.
This would have been a bad value for Hopkins even if Johnson hadn't flopped. But to add insult to injury, he only totaled 919 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns and was cut after 2 years. NFL journalist Bill Barnwell may have put it best. This is a jaw-dropping, mind-bending, inexplicable trade for O'Brien, whose bizarre run as Texans general manager is going to be the subject of a 30 for 30 documentary one day. And sorry, Vikings fans, but it's time to run it back to 1989 and remember the trade that built the Dallas Cowboys into a dynasty. Betting your team's future on one player is a gamble, but Herschel Walker was a generational talent in his day. Initially, Minnesota traded 4 players and 3 draft picks for Walker.
I think it was a great deal for both parties. And, I think you can't pick a better team to go to than the Minnesota Vikings.
However, the deal was set up to conditionally award the Cowboys more picks if they cut the 4 players that made the move. And Dallas took full advantage of that.
One owner said it's a great train robbery.
After cutting the 4 players, Dallas was now walking away with 3 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks. They would end up drafting Emmitt Smith, Darren Woodson, and Kevin Smith, all of which were key names in the Cowboys' ensuing 3 Super Bowls. Meanwhile, the Vikings' gamble did not pay off, because Walker only played 3 seasons in Minnesota, never rushing for over 1,000 yards. And in a deal that was supposed to take the Vikings to the Super Bowl, the NFC North franchise still has not made an appearance since. But in terms of bad trades in the 1980s, only one was as horrible as the Walker deal. See, quarterback trades always get the attention. However, in the 1983 NFL draft cycle, John Elway's move to the Denver Broncos was different, because the NFL's #1 prospect was so against playing for the dumpster fire that was the Baltimore Colts, he threatened to play baseball instead of football. Baltimore was adamant about not trading Elway, and for good reason. He was a generational talent, but sticking to their guns ended up harming their potential return on a trade. By the time a trade was finally agreed upon, they ended up with offensive tackle Chris Hinton, QB Mark Herman, and a first-rounder in 1984. And if it wasn't clear, none of those guys were John Elway. Elway is now the most important figure in Broncos history, winning 3 Super Bowls as a player and team executive. The Colts eventually found their Super Bowl winning QB in Peyton Manning, but they spent 15 years in agony watching Elway lead Denver to success. And while Elway is a living legend in Denver, we saw Russell Wilson fall from grace in the Mile High City. Because ever since 2022, when Denver gave up 3 players, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks for Wilson, it's been nothing short of a disaster. In his Seahawks days, Wilson was the man. Super Bowl winner, 9-time Pro Bowler,
Mr. Unlimited.
He had it all. And his move to the Broncos seemed like a great idea. But Wilson went 11-19 as a starter for Denver, and has looked like a shell of his former self. And toward the end of the 2023 season, Denver even benched him due to contract disputes, choosing to put money over their relationship with the QB. But while the Seahawks haven't exactly skyrocketed since the trade, there is room for optimism. Their 2 first-round picks from this trade, tackle Charles Cross and corner Devin Witherspoon, are already making waves in the NFL, with Witherspoon making the Pro Bowl as a rookie. However, as Seattle is set up for the future, the Broncos have already cut Wilson, and they don't have premier young talent coming in. And they have to figure out a way to find a new quarterback. like the 49ers did in 1987. Except there should have been no way that the 49ers won the Steve Young trade. After being drafted in the first round of the '84 supplemental draft by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Young flopped. But Tampa was still able to get a second-round and fourth-round pick from the 49ers for him after they drafted Vinny Testaverde. This is all while San Francisco had Joe Montana on the roster. Montana had already won 2 Super Bowls and was in his prime, so it felt as if the 49ers were putting the cart before the horse. But after a few years of splitting time with Montana, Young took over as the starter, and the rest is history. Young won a Super Bowl, 2 MVPs, and finished with a 91-33 record with the Niners. The Buccaneers continued to struggle with Testaverde and did not make the playoffs again until 1997. Neither of their selections after the trade, Winston Moss and Bruce Hill, made the Pro Bowl in their careers. Despite all the signs pointing toward the 49ers making the wrong move, it led to the franchise's 5th Super Bowl title. And unfortunately for Atlanta, the Buccaneers weren't the only team who gave away a Super Bowl winning quarterback, because Brett Favre, who is synonymous with Packers green and yellow, started his career as a Falcon.
Atlanta has selected Brett Favre, quarterback, Southern Mississippi.
Atlanta drafted Favre as the 33rd overall pick in the '91 draft, but it wasn't working out. So the Falcons looked into letting him loose.
He said, "What school are you from, Mississippi?" I was like, "Southern Miss." He said, "Yeah, we drafted the wrong guy."
And realized there were several teams desperate for a new QB. After receiving a first-round pick from the Packers, it felt like the Falcons had fully recouped their investment. Except a year later, Atlanta's blunder was already apparent. Favre made the Pro Bowl in his first season in Green Bay, setting the stage for an all-time career. Over the next 5 years, Favre won 3 consecutive MVP awards and a Super Bowl in '96. His 16 years with the Packers is one of the most memorable runs in NFL history, and it doesn't happen without a quick-fire move from Atlanta. But for every Brett Favre story, there's also one like Ryan Leaf's. As a former number 2 overall pick, Leaf's career flop is only emphasized by the fact that Peyton Manning was taken in the spot before him. But in 1998, the San Diego Chargers were so convinced that Leaf was the real deal, they made a gigantic trade to move up 1 spot and draft him. The Cardinals were happy to move down in exchange for the Chargers' second-round pick that year and their first-round pick in 1999. They were also handed 2 players, Patrick Sapp and Eric Metcalf, though neither really panned out. But if the hype wasn't already real for Leaf, that trade created a different level of expectation. It didn't help that Leaf told fans after signing that, "I'm looking forward to a 15-year career, a couple of trips to the Super Bowl, and a parade through downtown San Diego." Leaf's career in San Diego lasted just 2 years and 21 games. Leaf was often injured, but was generally terrible when he did hit the field. And by the age of 26, after just 3 years in the NFL, Leaf was out of the league. The Chargers' blunder was so bad that there are few draft moves that can top it. But in terms of deals that can compare, let's head to Chicago and talk about the Bears and Mitch Trubisky. What is there to say about Mitch Trubisky that hasn't been said? He's one of the NFL's most prominent flops. Chicago fans still get made fun of for his run, but the Bears giving up a significant amount to draft him only makes it hurt more. It was the 2017 NFL Draft, and Chicago traded the 49ers their first-round pick, 2 third-round picks, and a fourth-round selection to move up 1 spot to the 2nd overall pick. And while quarterback flops happen all the time, it was who Chicago drafted Trubisky over that makes this an all-time bad trade. See, 2 other quarterbacks were drafted in the first round of the 2017 NFL Draft, Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. While Watson's career to this point has been rocky, there's been no denying that he was an elite QB during his time in Houston. And Mahomes, well, he's been all right, I guess. Bears fans have had to watch him win 2 MVPs and 3 Super Bowls while wondering what could have been. But who knows if Mahomes would have actually panned out in Chicago. Sometimes the team you're on is the most important factor in your success. We saw that in 2007, when Randy Moss was traded from the Oakland Raiders to the New England Patriots. Moss was coming off a disappointing year with the Raiders and was 3 seasons removed from his last All-Pro honor. Thanks to his outspoken personality, Moss had plenty of critics, most of whom were ready to declare him washed up after his move to the Patriots. Instead, he proved why he is considered one of the all-time greats. Moss caught 98 passes for 1,493 yards and 23 touchdowns in his first season in New England, and then followed up with 2 more seasons with over 1,000 yards. And what did the Raiders get for Randy Moss? A 4th-round pick. A 4th-round pick they spent on cornerback John Bowie, who was out of the league after 2 seasons. It doesn't get any more lopsided than that. Now, Colts fans, Buckle in. It's time for the Trent Richardson trade. The Elway trade may have been franchise-defining, but the Richardson deal in 2013 is a different mistake entirely. Coming out of college, Richardson had as much hype as any running back that decade. He dominated at Alabama and had all the traits of a premier NFL running back, but in his rookie year with the Cleveland Browns, all the hype fell flat. Richardson averaged just 3.6 yards per carry and looked far less convincing against other pros. But somehow, Indianapolis didn't get the memo. The Colts needed a running back to complement Andrew Luck. So when the Browns indicated that they might trade Richardson, the Colts took a chance.
Jim Irsay was not kidding when he said this was going to be a monumental, a shocking trade, and it is.
Trading their first-round pick in the 2014 draft for Richardson. And to put it simply, Richardson was bad. He averaged just 3.1 yards per carry with the Colts, totaling 977 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns in his 2 seasons with the team. After missing a team meeting in the 2015 offseason, Richardson was released and never played a regular season snap in the NFL again. But you're not out of the deep end yet, Colts fans, because Indianapolis is still feeling the effects from the move for Carson Wentz in 2021. Midway through the 2017 season, Carson Wentz looked like a future face of the NFL. He propelled the Eagles to an 11-2 record as a starter that year, but an ACL tear led to Nick Foles making history and winning the Super Bowl. Philly still believed in Wentz, but the next 3 years were rough to watch. Wentz played okay, but he was constantly injured and could just never really get back to the level he played at in 2017. But just like with Richardson, the Colts didn't get the message. They offered a conditional first-round pick and a third-round pick for Wentz, which Philly happily accepted. All things considered, Wentz played decently for Indy, throwing for 3,563 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. But part of why this move was a failure was what the Colts did next. They pulled the plug on the Wentz experience, trading him to the Washington Commanders for, essentially, a couple of third-round picks. So basically, the Colts paid a premium for 1 season of Carson Wentz. But we can finally give Indy a break and instead look to the Rams because, oh man, this one is a doozy. In 1993, Offensive Rookie of the Year running back Jerome "the Bus" Bettis looked like the future of the Rams franchise. But a change in offensive style and a move to St. Louis shook things up for the team, and Bettis' production quickly dropped off. His fall from being the lead running back even caused the Rams head coach Rich Brooks to try and get Bettis to change to the fullback position. The Bus wasn't happy with that.
I was fed up. Completely fed up. And if they weren't going to give me the opportunity to go to another team, then I was ready to retire.
So the Rams offered him a trade exit instead. They sent Bettis and a third-round pick to the Steelers for a second-round pick and a fourth-rounder. Instantly, Bettis showed the Rams why they screwed up. In his first year in the Steel City, he made the All-Pro and Pro Bowl squads, setting up 6 consecutive seasons with 1,000 rushing yards or more. By the end of his career, the Bus hoisted the Lombardi Trophy and made the Pro Bowl 6 times. And now that he's a Hall of Famer, his early days with the Rams are almost forgotten. The Bettis trade was bad, but Steve Largent's move from the Houston Oilers may be one of the craziest examples of misjudged talent ever. In 1976, Largent was selected in the 4th round by the Oilers, but for one reason or another, they were immediately underwhelmed by the wide receiver.
He was undersized, wasn't fast. He was labeled as a slow white guy.
In fact, the Oilers were planning to cut Largent just months after drafting him, until the Seahawks expressed interest and were able to get him for an 8th-round pick. And in return for saving his NFL career, Largent repaid Seattle by putting together an all-time great career. Over 14 seasons with the Seahawks, Largent set every major franchise receiving record, catching 819 passes for 13,089 yards and 100 touchdowns, and was the first player in Hawks history to have his number retired. Largent terrorized the 49ers and other NFC teams for over a decade. But what's terrorizing San Francisco these days is what could have been with Trey Lance. Considering that they've made 3 consecutive NFC championships, it's hard to feel bad for the 49ers right now, but they have one of the NFL's biggest fan bases, a stacked offense, and are often competing for Super Bowls. But despite all of that, they still made a disastrous trade for Trey Lance. Even the best teams have off days, right? Well, San Francisco's mistake cost them 3 first-round picks and a third-rounder. In return, Lance made 4 total starts. He was initially expected to learn under Jimmy Garoppolo, meaning he had few opportunities as a rookie. But when it was time for Lance to become the guy in 2022, he suffered a broken ankle in just his second start of the season. Brock Purdy eventually stepped in and took the job for his own. And boy, are the Niners lucky that Purdy has panned out, because he has almost completely covered up the major blunder that moving up for Trey Lance was. When the 49ers traded away Lance to the Cowboys for a 2023 fourth-round pick, it all but confirmed that San Francisco made one of the worst trades in NFL history. But the worst trade in NFL history? Well, that's gotta be the team that traded their entire draft away for a running back. Legendary NFL coach Mike Ditka's time with the Bears culminated in a Super Bowl, but his time with the Saints culminated in disaster because of one trade. In the 1999 NFL Draft, Texas running back Ricky Williams was an insane prospect. Coming out of college, Williams had put up jaw-dropping numbers. His Heisman-winning campaign in '98 saw him go for 2,124 yards and 28 total touchdowns, and Ditka was one of many who believed Williams was the next big thing. Ditka believed so strongly in Williams that he traded every pick the Saints owned in the '99 draft and a first and third rounder in the 2000 draft in order to move up from 12 to 5 and take Ricky. Immediately, Williams had injury issues as a rookie, but the biggest problem was that the Saints were abysmal, going 3-13. On top of that, giving up so many resources for Williams meant they could barely improve the team. Ditka was fired after the season, just adding to the chaos in New Orleans. Williams did get better with back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, but the damage was done, and he was never on good terms with the Saints organization. After 3 seasons, New Orleans traded him and never got their money's worth for the gigantic deal. For more of the best NFL content on YouTube, stick with BLITZ.